Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're in deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to a pretty jam-packed weekly recap, where we have a lot of men's catsketball news to go over, but we're obviously going to start with probably the biggest news in all of K-State sports, just by virtue of it being the football news. But before we get into anything, as always, we do have to thank Grandma.
Thank you, Grandma.
Grandma, thank you forever. But I feel like the most important bit of news to get into and just get into right away is the loss of K-State's offensive coordinator for football. I say that like he died. No, it's a fate worse than death. He's going to the Cowboys to be their offensive line coach under Brian Schottenheimer, who will almost certainly be a one-and-done coach. So who knows if Connor Riley will be back here soon. But Connor Riley, that left a big vacancy, not only in the offensive coordinating room, but in the offensive line room in terms of who that coach is going to be. We do know who is going to fill each of those positions respectively, but I feel like it's important to just kind of talk about Riley himself first. So what were your initial thoughts to the news that Connor Riley was going to be going to the NFL?
I was pretty surprised, honestly, that he was leaving. I kind of took him to be a Kleiman lifer, and I figured when Kleiman was done, he would be done, but I figure he also probably didn't foresee him getting a chance to go to the NFL, and that's been a goal of his. And if he wants to coach Cooper Beebe again, then that's a tough offer to turn down. But it was definitely a surprise to start with, and it wasn't one of those ones where there were kind of rumblings throughout the whole offseason that it might happen. I mean, it wasn't even as drawn out as Colin Klein leaving for
like 2 hours.
Yeah, like if you slept in that morning and didn't wake up until 11 or 12, you would have missed everything, and you would have just woken up to Connor Riley being gone. So wasn't a lot of time for processing it. So it's why I honestly kind of keep forgetting that it happened. Is because there was never really any pushback, or there was never an obvious overture from K-State, or some tug of war, is he going, is he staying? It just happened, and it was pretty unceremonious.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best way to put it, is unceremonious, because it was such a quick turnaround where it was rumored and then maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours later, it was done, which I had a complicated relationship with Connor Riley and his play calling. I feel like a lot of fans did, but I think I may have slingshot on him more than just about anyone else, because he went from so good to probably one of the worst 3-game stretches in the Kleiman era. And yes, we're including the Deuce Vaughn Wildcat game against Texas. Did he ever have a game as bad as that? No. But Messingham also never had a stretch that bad. But it is definitely a loss, and a lot of it comes down to this will be Avery Johnson's third coordinator in as many years as he's been in college. And the upside, though, is that it was an in-house elevation to the offensive coordinator role, and that was Matt Wells, who we made a video on. So that I'm really happy that that's relevant again. But
you say we, I did absolutely nothing on this video.
You were quality control.
I think I was going to say, I think I watched it before I went out and said, "Yep, looks good."
QC, but we'll start with the offensive coordinator, because the other part is Brian the Pack was elevated to offensive line coach or tight ends coach. Probably ends up being the tight ends coach. Tight ends coach probably ends up being a second outside hire, if I were guessing. But I do think that the Wells hire I don't. I think it'll honestly end up being a slight improvement that'll feel like a much bigger improvement than it actually is, because a lot of the Wells offense through the passing game will be screen and shot plays. And I think that those will sort of trick people into thinking that, oh, Matt Wells is just leagues and leagues ahead of where Connor Riley was. And I think that you'll get an increase in the passing game, but you'll probably see a slight decrease in the running game. If I were guessing, I'd say either Brian Anderson or Brian LePack get elevated to run game coordinator just because they'd be familiar with the schemes. But I would expect a lot more counter and a lot more RPO action with Wells on the sticks. But it's not going to be a completely new look offense, which I wouldn't have expected that, even though Matt Wells and Connor Riley have very, very, very different play calling and backgrounds and philosophies.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think it's going to be a major change. We might see some slightly different wrinkles. I mean, I don't think we're going to see like a wholesale offensive change like we did transitioning from Messingham to Klein, because Riley ultimately was, for the most part, running the offense that had already been installed. And I imagine Wells is going to be fairly similar to that. He may get to add something of his own because he has a lot of experience uh, around working with offenses, working in the passing games. So he may get a little bit more freedom to do what he wants in that area. But I think you're kind of on the right track there. Where at the end of the day, it's not going to, at least in terms of scheming, it's not going to be super different probably. But that's just all speculation on my part. But I don't imagine that Kleiman's going to reinvent the wheel here or anything with the offense.
Yeah. And I hear the concerns about Wells as a play caller, especially with because he did rely a lot on screens at Texas Tech and pretty much all throughout his career. I think the only player that had like a sub 15% screen rate when being coached by Wells was Jordan Love. And this includes Chucky Keaton, who everyone has forgotten about, despite the fact that he was a very, very good but injury-prone quarterback. But I am tentatively excited for the hire. I call it a hire. It's just an elevation. I think it's going to be pretty much the same. I think the sneaky big part of it is Brian LePack getting his roses and finally getting upgraded to offensive line coach from tight ends coach. And we keep hearing about how Brian LePack is this wonderkind that has just been getting different coaching offers. Apparently he was getting flirted with by Oklahoma in this last cycle. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Brian LePack can do in the offensive line room because he was a former offensive lineman himself.
Yeah, LePack, I think that was the easy and natural choice. I've seen a little bit of concern about it, but I do think it's important to remember that LePack was an offensive lineman in college and has coached the offensive line, I think, at other stops as well. He was just a tight end coach primarily because we need to get him out of being an analyst and quality control guy because he frankly deserved more than that. And so that's what we did with him. So I and then also elevating, well, not really elevating, title change, title improvement for Drew Little as well, who gets the title assistant offensive line coach, which I have not seen before. Maybe that's more common at programs where they have like 50 different like analysts and such, but based off everything that we know, Drew Little he was like, I think, a quality control coach or offensive analyst or something before, but effectively was already the assistant offensive line coach. So I imagine he gets a little pay bump and a title change as a consolation prize for not getting the full promotion. But then, of course, with LePac taking over that offensive line spot, that still leaves an open assistant job on the staff of the tight ends coach. Now we have a open vacancy for one of our 10 on-field assistants.
I'm trying to think if I think it was someone on Twitter that was like, "Go get Neil Brown" just to complete the yes, Rex Kleiman has killed you.
Yeah, that like 2019 hiring cycle. We just add all of the Big 12 hires from that year to our staff. I mean, honestly, sure. I would not be opposed to that. I mean, anytime you can get a former Power 4 head coach to be your tight ends coach, I think you take that deal generally, particularly someone like Brown, who didn't do great at West Virginia, but I still think he could be a good coach, particularly in the offensive side of the ball. So,
I mean, because that was one thing that he could always do, is he was always producing and coaching pretty consistently solid wideouts and tight ends. Granted, the tight ends were just basically post players, but yeah, that's pretty much all I had in terms of thoughts on the coaching moves. Do you have anything else before we briefly give the celebration that Batcat season is the day this releases?
I don't think I have anything else on football coaches.
All right. Well, if that's the case, Batcat fans, it's today. The day that this releases, Friday, is the beginning of the Batcat season up against Washington. Ty Rule was given the day one start. And the transfer Liggett, he's not from Louisville. Is he a Louisville transfer?
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't end up having his name listed as the starters for the weekend, which is interesting, especially given that J.J. Slack was given a starting nod, which I think will probably be an opener unless Blake Dean has locked down the closer spot to the degree that Tyson Neighbors did, like his junior year. But yeah, I'm excited just to see where this team can go.
Yeah, I am too. I wish that there would be an easier way to watch and kind of stay in tune with these games that they're going to have. But you can always listen to them online. There's always an audio stream. I imagine it won't be Smoller that's there. It'll probably be Matt Walters, if I had to guess. Because this is, I imagine, a pretty hectic time for K-State and making sure all the games are broadcast, because they're going to have a lot going on simultaneously. But yeah, not seeing Liggett as a announced starter was a little surprising. I saw some speculation online that they may be holding out to have him start against North Carolina next Wednesday, I think, is when that's happening, which I suppose I could see that. But yeah, and then Slack getting the nod in the second game of the season, that is a little surprising, not because Slack isn't good. I think he's a really good pitcher, but he was a reliever and a closer last year. So seeing him get the start, that's definitely took me by surprise. But then Michael Cuvedo, he transferred in from, I believe, Nicholls State, and he'll start against St. Joseph's. And then Lincoln Sheffield, he's a JUCO transfer. He'll get the Monday start against Coastal Carolina. So of these first four games where we have announced starters, three of them are left-handed pitchers, which lefties there have been seasons in the past where we've really struggled to get left-handed pitching, quality left-handed pitching, but I suppose if there's this to begin with is anything to go off of, we've already got some pretty quality left-handers.
Yeah. That's pretty much all we had for Batcats. It's just exciting time.
Yep.
But now we get to talk about, for the first time this year, the men's team is actually going to get top billing above the women's team. And it's because they've deserved it, because they've been one of the hottest teams in the country. And I believe analytically over this win streak, the best team in the country for like Bart Torvik, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it's Bart Torvik. Over the last 6 or 7 games, K-State has been the best team in the country.
Which we'll talk about sort of outlook after we talk about these two games, but K-State pretty handily took down KU in Bramlage, 81-73. The score is really not as that's not really indicative. I think they kind of just hit 2 random threes to end the game and then just like, all right, whatever. But this was one of the few times that K-State has played KU that I've seen where it just felt like K-State was in control for the vast majority of the game. And that's both surprising and very, very, very encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, K-State was up 15 with 2.5 minutes left in this one. So, yeah, the score, KU started pressing like crazy out of nowhere at the very end of the game, but they weren't really fouling. It was a really weird situation where they were like kind of acting like they thought they were still in it, but they kind of weren't. It was not very inspired pressing, but it still worked, and they were able to force a turnover or two and get the score to look a little better than it really was. But for the most part, K-State really they handled KU on this one, and I think this is one of the first KU games in my lifetime where going into it, I actually felt pretty good about where we stood and our ability to beat them. Not just because of the season KU's having, which they're still having a decent year, even if it's not up to their standards, but because of the form that K-State had been in the past few games. So, yeah, incredible game. And also 2 years in a row beating KU, no court storm. I think at this point, that's not really like a court stormable game anymore. Like it has been in the past, just because the wins have been so infrequent. But I mean, we beat them in Bramlage 3 times in a row. There's not really a reason to storm the court anymore.
No, there's not. And I'll cover the starters here. And then David Gasson, 33 minutes, 9 of 13 from the field, 0 of 1 from 3, 2 of 3 on his free throws, 7 rebounds, 2 fouls, a block for 20 points. And of course, he's Dave, high effort defense, and just also the yam that sort of sealed the game and posterized. I think it was Zeke Mayo in the back with the shot.
I think so. I think it was Zeke Mayo, yeah.
Which, cinema. But then Doug McDaniel, 36 minutes, 6 of 15 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, 6 rebounds, 1 foul, 11 assists, 3 turnovers, 1 steal, and 15 total points. So a double-double. And a lot of those threes came in like extremely clutch moments early on, weirdly enough. And he also just had a lot of hustle plays, which, good Lord, if we got this version of Doug McDaniel from the beginning, we're probably a top 25 team, which I feel like no matter what happens at the end of this season, that will be the takeaway is like, oh, if we just figured it out like 3 games earlier, but can't waste on that now. But Coleman Hawkins played 37 minutes, 5 of 10 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3, missed his 1 free throw, did get 5 boards, 2 of them being offensive, 4 fouls, 8 assists, 5 turnovers, 5 blocks, and 1 steal. So he stuffed the stat sheet. That is the Coleman Hawkins special right there. Doing a little bit of everything. Then Max Jones, 28 minutes, 4 of 6 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3, 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 2 fouls, 2 assists, 1 turnover, a steal, and 12 total points. Then Brendan Howson, 3 of 10 from the field in 32 minutes, 5 rebounds, 2 steals for 9 points. So, again, that's just this team. It's going to be the primary starting 5, though there were a few really, really impressive moments from 2 people from the bench players, especially.
Yeah. Of course, a game carried by the starters, as you're just normally going to see at this point in the season. But K-State did not go super deep in the bench, only playing 3 players. And one of those players was David Castillo. He only played 2 minutes, and all he registered was a foul. So really the entire bench impact was from 2 guys. And if this is the type of performance we can get from them for the rest of the year, I'll be pretty pleased with that, honestly. And that starts with CJ Jones. He played 21 minutes, 3 of 8 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3. So he had 7 points in this one and had a foul and 2 assists to 0 turnovers. So a much better game from CJ Jones than what we had been seeing. He's really, despite the emergence of K-State, honestly had some pretty bad performances in the last few weeks. But this KU game with CJ Jones, that was kind of the start of a nice 2-game stretch for CJ because really he had not played particularly well since the West Virginia game. But this game was a nice return to form for him. And then otherwise, the other player to really make a big impact was Moby Ikeburuka, who is very quickly winning the hearts of the K-State fan base for his borderline psychotic defense and his, I'd say, borderline unnecessary jumping out of the gym on every rebound. But if nothing else, it's very entertaining to watch. And it's also really refreshing to see a guy play with such high effort. But Moby, he went 3 of 4 in this game, brought down only 2 rebounds, but 1 foul, 2 steals, and finished with 6 points. So really nice game for Moby. He had a nice kind of push shot on the baseline at one point over Dickinson. And I think his other 2 baskets were lobs that weren't finished with dunks, but he just kind of dropped in the bucket. So Moby only played 11 minutes, but it was 11 really good minutes. And generally, he's been playing really great defense recently as well. I've seen a few comparisons online to where the way he plays defense is kind of similar to the way that Frank Martin would have wanted people to play defense for K-State back when that defensive unit for K-State, everybody called them the Dobermans was what they called them. So I think people are kind of getting some flashbacks to that. Maybe that's why people were liking Moby so much, because the Frank years, even through up and down, were always pretty happy in the fan base for the most part. But yeah, not a lot of bench production this game, but it was exactly what we needed. And it was also generally pretty timely.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to do it, is needed and timely. And speaking of needed, we beat Arizona the very next game, 73-70. And this is a really, really good and similarly hot Arizona squad. And again, there's a little bit more in terms of bench production here, as in 1 more person played. But this was, I know that this is a bench player, but I want to talk about it now. Wasn't it Moby in this game that had in his 1 field goal was just the definition of a psycho possession, where he covered basically everyone on defense?
Yeah, he had that one possession on defense where, I think he did end up guarding 3 or 4 different players for Arizona and was on the ball for most of the possession just because he just kept switching. But he was just absolutely ferocious on that possession. And of course, he had the one of the most memorable plays of the year up to this point late in the game with a steal and 1 dunk that he threw down pretty late in the game. But yeah, Moby, it was this game in particular, I think, that really has kind of cemented his status as a cult hero for K-State basketball this year. He's obviously, not the best player on the roster, but he is a player that absolutely everybody loves.
Yeah, it seems that we've had a pretty high hit rate on freak athlete JUCO guys.
Yeah, I mean, if like we can, if there's a like Moby factory somewhere, I'd love to place an order for additional Mobies in the future because this one seems to work really well, and I could go for another one.
Anyway, you have the starters for this one.
Yeah. Again, this is another starter heavy game, although there was even better bench production in some ways in the KU game. But the man of the hour in terms of box score watching and also on the court was Doug McDaniel. Doug was fantastic in this game, 10 of 22 from the field, only 1 of 5 from three, and he made the only made three of the game for K-State and was 3 of 3 at the free throw line. So Doug finishes with 24 points, a season high for Doug. And some of the layups he was making, he has like an understanding of backboard use that you do not see very often. Um, Normally, like the go-to move is just throw it high off the glass and just hope it's soft enough. But like he really does have a pretty intricate understanding of exactly where to put the ball to make sure that it goes in. And I don't know, maybe he's really good at geometry or something. I don't know, but he was wildly entertaining in this game. Had a few really great moments as well. But he had 4 rebounds, then 3 assists to 3 turnovers and 5 steals in this one. K-State was really great in getting steals in this game. As a team, they finished with 14 in this one, which is just absolutely absurd. So at some point, that's a scouting report thing. In K-State was just jumping in passing lanes before the pass was even being made half the time. So big shout out to K-State's defense in this game. But moving on, David Gasson was the next leading scorer. Only 23 minutes. He dealt with foul trouble this entire game, which I suppose the officials are a whole other subplot of this game. But Dave went 7 of 9 from the field, 2 of 3 on his free throws, 7 rebounds, 3 of them on offense. Did foul out late in the game and had a couple turnovers, but still got 16 points on this one. I thought he played really quite well, but just some tough luck with some fouls. And yeah, the officiating in this game was certainly interesting, if nothing else, which I suppose we can talk about after we talk about all the players. But moving on through here, Brendan Hassan, he played 23 minutes, 2 of 6 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3, and 4 of 5 on his free throws. So 8 points for him. I mean, nobody was making threes on this night. I mean, if Brendan Hassan's going 0 of 4, then it's just not the night to take many threes. But then 1 rebound and a steal for Brendan, who otherwise played some of the best defense I think that he's played as a Wildcat. Particularly these last 2 games in particular, Brendan's been playing much better defense. There's been some people who have been really leading the charge on Hassan not playing good defense, and that's been accurate. I mean, he has been genuinely bad at defense on a few occasions this season, but really played, I think, pretty well these last couple games. Max Jones, he played 39 minutes, so nearly went the distance in this one. 2-4 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3. One of his buckets was a ferocious putback dunk on a missed transition layup by Doug, I think.
Yep.
Then went 3 of 5 at the free throw line, so 7 points for Max, and then threw in 7 rebounds as well. 4 fouls, an assist, a turnover, a block, and a steal. So Max actually stuffed the stat sheet in this game, which is good to see. But then rounding out the starting lineup, Coleman Hawkins offensively had probably his worst game of the year. I don't know what it was. His shot was just wildly off in this game. Like every shot he took, like it just did not look right. Like even from just like where I was sitting, I never felt confident that any of his shots were going in. I was just pleasantly surprised if they did during this game.
Which only happened twice, so.
Yeah, and one of those was that well, no, one of them was not the goaltend because they overturned it. We got to talk about that later. Coleman Hawkins, 38 minutes, 2 of 11 from the field, 0 of 6 from 3, 2 of 4 at the free throw line. So only 6 points for him. And Still did some decent things though, outside of scoring. 2 rebounds, did foul 3 times, but he had 4 assists to 3 turnovers, including a pretty nice pass to Brendan Haasson on a cutting layup at one point, and he threw in 3 steals as well. Again, tons and tons of steals in this game for K-State. Shows some real buy-in to the scouting report. But yeah, definitely not Coleman's best game. Wildly inefficient shooting the ball. Did have that really weird situation with the goaltend that wasn't earlier in the game. But that's the starters. So I guess AC can get into the bench players now.
Yep. And while there are 4 that played, really only 2 contributed. CJ Jones, 20 minutes, 4 of 7 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3, 2 of 5 on his free throws, 4 rebounds, 1 foul, 1 assist, 1 steal for 10 points. So I believe it might not be his absolute best game on the year, but it's definitely up there, especially with the relatively brutal stretch that he had for a while, including we're going to bring it up every time, the 6 offensive efficiency rating.
Yeah, that was pretty horrific, but CJ had a game. He really did.
Yep. And then we already talked about Moby. Moby Akegaruka played 14 minutes, 1 of 3 from the field, 0 of 1 on his free throws, 4 rebounds, 1 foul, 3 steals, 2 points, and the psycho possession, which will live on forever.
Yeah, his defense was just phenomenal in this game. His defensive effort was obvious as well, and everybody in the crowd. It was good effort too. It wasn't just like running around for no reason. Like he was playing really, really well in this game.
Yeah. Then the last 2 bench players each played 3 minutes. Ugana Onyenso didn't attempt a shot. Neither of them attempted a shot, but Ugana Onyenso got a rebound, a foul, and a block. And then David Castillo, the only stat that he registered was a block, which can't say I saw that coming. But yeah, now we get to talk about the referees and the goaltend that wasn't.
And just generally how weird of a game this was. This was a very wacky game. Like even outside the officiating and the goaltend that wasn't, and all this other stuff. I mean, K-State went 1 of 19 from 3 in this game. Arizona went 2 of 22 from 3. I really thought K-State was going to have to like shoot well from 3 to beat this Arizona squad, because Arizona coming to this game had won 13 of their last 14 games going back to December. Their only loss was at Texas Tech. And the game before this one that we just played, they got their revenge on Texas Tech and beat them by 9. So this was the Arizona team that was just been on fire for the last month and a half to 2 months. And we really did not play a great game, honestly, and we still won, which is just absolutely absurd. But K-State really relied on forcing a lot of turnovers, 17 Arizona turnovers to just 10 for K-State. And then also 46 points in the paint for K-State, despite Arizona having some pretty solid players in the paint. But then 23 points off of turnovers for K-State to just 10 for Arizona, which Arizona, I believe they're one of the best teams in scoring and transition in the entire country. And K-State more than doubled up Arizona in that department. Of course, with the exclamation point there being Moby's and 1 dunk there at the end of the game. But man, despite all those great things that we just said, the officials really struggled in this game, and they had to, I'm not really even sure how to say it, but like it was just all over the place, man. And K-State actually did get was a beneficiary of a really bad call late in the game, but there was more than enough to go both ways that I think both teams have plenty to gripe about. But of course, we're going to talk from the K-State perspective mostly. The goaltend was one of the more egregious, particularly because they called it as Coleman was got the rebound and put it in an easy layup. So we would have gotten the points anyways if they had just not called the goaltend. But instead, like 3 possessions later to timeout, they go back and review it and take the points away retroactively. I didn't see the replay because I was at the game. So I don't know if it actually was a goaltend or
It
not.
was.
Okay. So it was a goaltend. They messed that up. But that's also just a case of over officiating because Coleman got the rebound and put it back up. That's a wash right there. You don't need to step in and give the points for goaltending. You can just let the game happen because that was a ball to the line moment for Coleman. Yeah, it was a goaltend, but he just got his own rebound and put it back in anyways. Like the problem solved right there on the floor.
Yeah. And it was just a weird game all around and just one that I'm happy we won. And that's kind of my biggest takeaway is that full disclosure, we were really hot going into these 2 games, but you look ahead into the schedule and yeah, you have a tough trip up against BYU. And then pretty much every other game on the schedule is gettable. BYU is going to be tough, especially in Utah. Utah has been mid. Arizona State is dealing with their own problems. UCF could be literally anything on any given night. I think that's just kind of UCF's bag in every single sport. And then Colorado's been the worst team in the Big 12 up to this point. And then we get Cincinnati at Cincinnati and then wrapping up the season against Iowa State. So this is sort of a favorable draw to end the year. However, it's also a draw that I'm not sure that – I think this team is uniquely equipped for big games in particular. And I worry about the back end.
Yeah, and Jerome Tang has really shown that he can get teams ready and excited to participate in games against top 25 teams. He's 13-3 at home against ranked teams in his time at K-State, which is just an unbelievable record, especially considering last year we did not make the NCAA tournament, and right now we're just 2 games above 500. So 13-3 against ranked teams at home is sensational. But yeah, this BYU game is going to be really tough. They have a fantastic point guard who is like 6'9", Igor Demin. He's going to be really tough to deal with. So I'm not exactly sure who we're going to put on him. It's probably just going to be a rotating cast of characters that have to face him. But BYU is a good team. Utah, that's a winnable game, but that's not an easy game. And another thing to consider is I think this team is really tired as well. They've been going all out these last 6 games in particular. So I worry about going to Utah and playing 2 consecutive games in a higher altitude than we're used to. And I'm having to just go on the road at all. It's going to be tough. The one benefit maybe is BYU and Utah. I think KU is also going out to Utah at the same time we are. So that's something to hope maybe BYU looks ahead. I don't think BYU will, but you could have a chance that Utah may have a kind of letdown game after playing KU. I don't think BYU is going to overlook us, though, because they're kind of a bubble team right now as well. They really need to solidify their tournament bid, just like we need to keep getting wins to get ourselves in the tournament, because right now we're approaching like the midpoint of the bubble. We're still not on the right side, but most bracketologists have us in either the next 4 out. I even saw one have us in the first 4 out, which was incredible. So that's a lot of rambling to say. Basically, pretty much every game is like a must win. Like the number that keeps going around is 5-2 in the regular season to make it, but I think you have to treat every game like a must win because that margin for error is just so slim. And even if you do go like 6-1, you've still given the committee plenty of reasons to leave you out, like Wichita State, like TCU on the road, like Oklahoma State on the road, like Drake. Granted, Drake has actually had a pretty good year, and they're like kind of a metrics darling, so they're going to make it at large anyways. But them losing to LSU, who has not been good this year, losing that game at home by double digits, then dropping that game to Liberty as well, and the multi-team event earlier this year. There's plenty of reasons the committee could look to leave us out, but of course, we're going to hope they take a "what have you done for me lately" approach, because if that's the case, then if the season ended right now, like we'd be golden. And if you only took the last like 6 or 7 games into account, like we'd probably be a 1 seed.
Yeah.
That was all that mattered. But no, it's going to be a tough stretch regardless. Arizona State's going to want revenge as well, and they're another bubble team. UCF, they really need to get right, and that's a road game, so I'm worried about that. Cincinnati, that's a road game I'm worried about. And of course, Iowa State, they're definitely going to want revenge, and they're going to have Momcilovic back for that as well once we get all the way into March. But again, I'm rambling a lot on this, but I think it's partially to make up for lost time because we had several episodes there where we just did not say anything about this team, pretended
Because they didn't deserve it.
Yeah, they didn't deserve it. But this team has rattled off one of the most improbable in-season turnarounds ever. I saw some analytics account on Twitter ran the numbers, and we had a 0.05% chance of winning the last, 6 games? That's the streak we're on, 6? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a 1 in 2,000 chance of us winning the last 6 games. So we have quite literally resurrected this season from being genuinely dead. I mean, we were completely out of the tournament field, and all of a sudden we have forced ourselves back into the conversation. Obviously, there's going to be time for a greater dissection of what happened this year and how to feel about it, because there's tons of mixed emotions. But for now, the best advice is enjoy the ride and cheer loud and hope we make the tournament.
Yeah, and I'm on the 6-1 train. Honestly, I think we can only drop 1 game, and honestly, that game probably is Iowa State at home. I feel like that's the only game that wouldn't basically just woodshed us.
I kind of disagree on that, honestly. I think we could drop this BYU game and be fine. Okay. BYU is a really good basketball team. They're 16-8, and they've been okay recently, but I do think that we could drop that game and probably survive. But I do think that you're right, though. The 5-2 is pushing it, and we probably go 1-1 in Kansas City as well if we get to that point. But another thing to take into account with Kansas City is if we win out, there is a non-zero chance that we will get a double bye in Kansas City as well. So we may not actually have many opportunities to get wins in Kansas City, depending on how well we finish this season or potentially how poorly other teams finish the season. Because right now we're in a 3-way tie for, I think, 6th right now. Okay. With BYU and Baylor, followed closely by TCU and West Virginia. So it is a very tight race to get that last double bye spot. Houston's running away with it, as is Arizona. Texas Tech, they're a weird team, but I don't know. Man, and officials, they totally missed that over and back in the Arizona game at the end.
Yep.
On us, which I didn't catch that Max was the one that was behind mid-court at first, so I thought the Arizona fans sitting next to me were complaining about over and back on Doug like stumbling across half court, and I was like, he very clearly didn't. Like, I was like, I watched that play, he did not do it, but I didn't see that Max had been across. Well, we'll call that a wash for the earlier goaltend. I think is where we're at. Plus the stoppage of play after that steal, that would have been an easy dunk for Max Jones, where they went to the monitor. That one, they didn't make any friends in Bramlage with that one either. But man, you know what? It's nice to care this much about men's basketball again. I'll say that, if nothing else.
Yeah. But I don't want to breeze by the two women's games, but both of them were blowouts and neither of them really have anything to glean. So I think I'll just kind of tell the score and then notable stat lines. But the first one was a brutal letdown loss up against Oklahoma State in Stillwater, 85-55, where we got outscored in the first quarter, 31-9. And no one survives those. You don't survive getting 31 skunked in a quarter and then live to tell the tale. Apparently, the rumor is that there's a flu bug going around in the locker room. Okay, you still lost by 30. Jalen Glenn had 13 points. Serena Sendell wasn't efficient, but had 11. She did have 7 assists, but I think that's about it in terms of notable stats.
I would like to stand up for victims of the flu briefly, as I did have the flu recently. I had flu A. And all I will say is if you had asked me to get up and play a basketball game in like those first like 36 hours, like I genuinely don't think I would have survived. Like I would have like collapsed on the court and gotten like trampled to death or something. So like when I heard about that flu bug, it's like I was like, I can really empathize with the way that they're feeling having to play a basketball game. But regardless, 30-point loss, man, that sucks. Particularly coming off the TCU game, probably the biggest letdown game in history. If you want to be real.
Yeah, it wasn't good, and then we turn around and just completely skunked Cincinnati, 90-53 in Cincinnati. I mean, the notable performances are Serena Sundell, who got a double-double because that's Serena Sundell activities. Tamara Poindexter, who got 18, and then Taryn Sides got 17. I mean,
Taryn had a double-double, man.
Oh, yeah, she did. With
rebounds.
I just don't even look at Taryn Sides as rebounds because I don't expect anything to be there. So it's like a pleasant surprise every time that there's more than like 2.
17 and 12 for Taryn. I definitely was not expecting Taryn to get points and rebounds, double-double this season, but here we are, man.
Yeah. If it seems like we're brushing past these games, it's because we kind of are, because there's nothing to really glean or learn from them. We got kicked by Oklahoma State, who's a good team in Stillwater when we had the flu. And then we destroyed a mid-Cincinnati team in Cincinnati. That's it.
Yeah, I really do wish that there was more to say about those two games, but I mean, we took a flu-ridden squad down to Stillwater and managed to piece together 40 minutes of something resembling basketball. And then we went to Cincinnati and took out our frustrations and got healthy. And yeah, the mission remains the same. It's win out, get a share of the Big 12 title at minimum. So that's where K-State's at.
Yeah, and this is completely off topic, and maybe it's something that we cover after the episode, but there is genuinely a non-zero chance that either the Big 12 or the NCAA is going to intervene with a certain TCU player.
The Sedona Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really hope that somebody does something about her, because it seems that every day something new emerges about Sedona Prince, and I just have to keep saying, I really don't think the Sedona Prince is a very kind person. And it becomes more true by the minute at this point. So K-State students, you didn't boo her enough, honestly.
Yeah, I think, did we mention the students having to be warned to not chant certain things?
I can't remember if we mentioned that or not. But in case we didn't, I'll mention it now. Early in the first quarter of the K-State TCU game, the K-State student section got a woman beater chant going against Sedona Prince, and security had to come over and say like you can't do that. And one guy, one brave soul in the student section was like, "But we don't stand for
We
that."
don't stand for that.
And the
I don't either.
security guy like looked at him and said, "Hey man, I get it. I don't either, but we can't do that." So like we don't want to get in trouble with the conference. And we were like, fine, whatever. So they just resorted to generalized booing, which was enough.
I will say there were a few, you need to leave.
Yeah, there was someone who just yelled, "You need to leave" at one point.
Did someone yell, "You're mean"?
Yeah, Sedona. Yeah, there were lots of G-rated funny insults being hurled. So if you force students to get creative with insults, they can do it. You just have to make them do it. And sometimes those are honestly even funnier. Maybe not as effective or getting the emotion across as well, but I think there's a pretty fair argument that those were even funnier.
Sedona, you're mean.
I know a group of people that would agree with that. So Sedona Prince, what a terrible person.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where I think genuinely either the conference or the NCAA is about to be like, all right, let's take a second here.
The NCAA doesn't seem keen to really punish anybody for doing anything at this point. So, Brett Yormark, the ball is in your court, man. Do you support women or not?
Do you support women or the women beater?
It's a simple question, Brett.
Anyway, it's an exciting time for K-State sports. Next week's weekly recap is going to go crazy because we have 2 men's games, 2 women's games, and I think like 6 Cats games.
I think it's, well, you know what? Let me check real quick because I have the schedule.
Because the women play UCF in Bramlage and then West Virginia on President's Day on Big Boy Fox. Downside, 1 p.m.
Yeah, a weird game. Not going to be a lot of rest either. It's really strange. Cats have 5 games that we'll need to recap. Washington 2 against Coastal Carolina, St. Joseph's in that Wednesday matchup against North Carolina. And then Thursday they fly back, and Friday they start another tournament at a Globe Life Field where they're going to get a rematch with Arkansas. And they get Michigan and then TCU. So again, Brian Smoller said it when we had him on, but just a brutal stretch to begin the season for K-State. But regardless, I'm still really excited to see what this team can do.
Yeah. Baseball season's back in swing. But you have any final notes before we sign off?
No, nothing more from me.
All right. Well, if that's the case, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggieVilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdward00.
I am at Connor Baltstord, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.